The rain had not yet come, but the sky over the kingdom of Ion hung low and gray, as though it, too, carried the burden of what had just been spoken between Prince Daniel and Naomi. The palace walls, usually gleaming gold under the afternoon sun, looked dull that day, swallowed by clouds that refused to break. Naomi walked briskly through the east corridor, her wrapper clutched tightly around her waist, her sandals slapping against the marble floor with a rhythm that betrayed her racing heart. She did not look back at Daniel, though she could feel his eyes on her spine, heavy and pleading. She turned the corner sharply, past the carved pillars that bore the crest of the royal family, a lion beneath a rising sun, and pushed open the door to the small guest chamber she had been given since her arrival at the palace. She shut the door and pressed her back against it, sliding down slowly until she sat on the cold floor, her knees drawn to her chest. Her hands trembled as she placed them over her belly, still flat, still unchanged to the eye, yet holding within it a secret that would soon reshape the destiny of two families, one royal, one common. A month, she whispered to herself. Only a month, and already my life is finished. Outside, Daniel stood frozen in the corridor, staring at the closed door. He had faced lions on hunting expeditions with his father. He had stood before councils of elders who questioned his right to inherit the throne. He had once stayed down a rebel warlord who threatened the northern borders. But nothing had ever made him feel as powerless as the sound of that door closing between him and the woman he loved. He raised his hand to knock, then let it fall. Give her time, he murmured to himself, though every part of him wanted to break the door down and hold her, to promise her the world even if the world was not yet ready to be promised. He turned and walked toward the west wing, toward the throne room, where he knew his mother, Queen Adise, would be waiting for the reports from the morning council. He had a duty to attend, a kingdom to serve, but his mind remained tethered to the girl behind that door, the daughter of a fisherman, the girl he had first seen selling smoked fish at the riverside market 3 years ago, the girl whose laughter had undone the walls he had built around his heart since childhood. The throne room of Ion was a cathedral of power. Ivory pillars rose toward a domed ceiling painted with the constellations their ancestors once used to navigate the great rivers. Golden drapes hung from floor to ceiling, embroidered with a royal lion. At the center, upon a raised dais, sat two thrones, one for the king, one for the queen, carved from dark mahogany and lined with leopard fur, a symbol of the founding covenant between the royal bloodline and the spirits of the forest. King Obinna sat upright, his robes a deep indigo threaded with silver, his crown resting heavy but familiar upon his brow. Beside him, Queen Adise sat with the composure of a woman who had ruled beside her husband for over 3 decades, her spine straight, her eyes sharp, missing nothing. Daniel entered and bowed before taking his place among the council members gathered before the dais. "My son," King Obinna said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had led his people through drought, through border wars, through the slow and careful modernization of a kingdom that still remembered its old ways. "You look troubled." "I am well, father," Daniel replied, though his voice lacked its usual steadiness. Queen Adise studied her son closely. She had raised 3 children, and she knew the difference between a tired prince and a burdened one. Something in Daniel's eyes reminded her of the day he had first confessed his feelings for the fisherman's daughter, that same mixture of hope and dread. "We will discuss the matter of the eastern trade routes," the king continued, gesturing to the council. "Minister Adise, what news do you bring?" The council proceeded with its business, trade agreements, a dispute over grazing land between 2 villages, preparations for the annual harvest festival that would bring dignitaries from across the continent to Aeon's gates. Daniel sat through it all, nodding when required, offering opinions when pressed, but his thoughts remained elsewhere, circling the small guest chamber where Naomi sat alone with her fae. When the council finally adjourned, Queen Adise rose from her throne and approached her son. "Walk with me," she said. It was not a request. They walked together through the palace gardens, where hibiscus flowers bloomed in defiance of the coming rain, their red petals vivid against the gray sky. The queen said nothing for a long while, allowing the silence to stretch, a technique she had long used to draw truth out of her children. "Daniel," she finally said, I have known you since before you could speak. I fed you. I bathed you. I taught you to walk upon these very stones. Do you think I cannot see when something troubles my son?" Daniel exhaled slowly. He had never been able to lie to his mother, not even as a child hiding stolen mangoes beneath his tunic. "Mother," he said carefully, "I made a promise to someone. I intend to keep it, whatever the cost." The queen's step slowed. "This is about the girl, Naomi." It was not a question. "Yes. I warned her to remain within her boundaries," the queen said, her voice measured but firm. "I warned you as well, Daniel, though you rarely listen to warnings, even from your own mother." "I love her," Daniel said simply, as though those 3 words could answer every question, defend against every accusation, dissolve every obstacle standing between him and the life he wanted. Queen Adise turned to face her son fully, her eyes searching his face the way she once searched the horizon for storm clouds before a voyage. "Love is a luxury kings and princes rarely afford themselves, my son. Our marriages are not merely unions of hearts. They are alliances, promises to our people, threads that hold together the fabric of peace between kingdoms and clans. I know the burden of the crown, mother. I have studied it my whole life. But must the crown demand my heart as well?" The queen said nothing for a long moment. She thought of her own youth, of choices made and unmade, of a love she herself had once set aside for the sake of duty. She would not tell her son this. Some wounds were meant to remain hidden, sealed beneath the weight of the years. "There is something you are not telling me," she said instead. Daniel's jaw tightened. He thought of Naomi's plea, "Do not tell your mother I am pregnant," and felt the familiar tug of loyalty pulling against loyalty, love against love, son against future father. "Not yet, mother," he said quietly. "But soon. I promise you. Soon you will understand everything." The queen studied him a moment longer, then nodded slowly, though the worry in her eyes did not fade. "Very well, my son. But understand this, whatever storm you are walking into, this palace, this family, cannot be shielded from it forever. Secrets in a palace are like water in a clenched fist. They always find a way to escape." That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills surrounding Ion, casting the palace in hues of amber and rose, Naomi finally emerged from her chamber. She had cried until there were no more tears left, had paced the small room until her legs ached, had rehearsed 100 different futures in her mind, none of them good. She found her way to the palace's private courtyard, a quiet garden reserved for the family and their closest attendants, where a single mango tree stood ancient and wide, its branches heavy with fruit not yet ripe. She sat beneath it, drawing her knees up once more, and stared out at the darkening sky. It was there that Zara found her. Zara, daughter of Chief Eberechi, had been promised to Daniel since childhood, not through royal decree, but through the quiet expectation of 2 powerful families who had long assumed their children would one day unite their houses. She was beautiful in the way carved statues were beautiful, precise, polished, admired from a distance. Her gowns were always immaculate, her jewelry always perfectly matched, her smile always measured to reveal just enough warmth to seem gracious without ever appearing weak. "You," Zara said, stopping a few feet from where Naomi sat today. Her voice carried the particular coldness reserved for those she considered beneath her notice. "I did not expect to find you weeping in the family courtyard. Does the palace no longer have enough corners for a servant girl to hide her tears?" Naomi quickly wiped her face and stood, straightening her wrapper. "I'm not a servant, Zara. I never have been." "No." Zara tilted her head, studying Naomi with the practiced disdain of someone who had spent her whole life being told she was superior. "Then what are you? A guest who arrived with nothing, who has borrowed cloth, who eats at a table she has no right to sit at." "I sit where the queen permits me to sit," Naomi said, though her voice wavered slightly. Zara laughed, a sound like glass chimes, beautiful and sharp. "The queen permits many things out of courtesy, fisherman's daughter. That does not mean she desires them. Do you truly believe Daniel will marry you? That the son of King Obina, heir to the throne of Ion, will place a crown upon the head of a girl who once sold fish by the river for coins?" Daniel's heart is his own to give, Naomi said, forcing steadiness into her voice even as her hands trembled at her sides. His heart, perhaps, Zara said, stepping closer, her voice dropping to something almost gentle, almost pitying, which somehow made it crueler still. But his throne is not his own to give. It belongs to his people, to his ancestors, to the alliances his father has spent 30 years building. Do you think love alone builds kingdoms? Do you think love alone feeds a nation during drought, or defends its borders during war? Naomi said nothing. She had no answer for this, not one that would satisfy Zara, not one that would satisfy the fear coiling tighter in her own chest with each passing second. Go home, Naomi, Zara said finally, her tone almost gentle now, almost sisterly, though the message beneath it was anything but kind. Go back to your village, to your nets and your river and your simple life. Save yourself the humiliation that is coming. Because I promise you, when this palace decides you do not belong, it will not be gentle in showing you the door. She turned and walked away, her silk gown trailing behind her like a queen already crowned, leaving Naomi alone once more beneath the ancient mango tree, her heart pounding, her secret pressing heavier than ever against her ribs. 3 days passed in this manner, Daniel attempting to reach Naomi, Naomi retreating further into herself, the palace humming with unspoken tension that everyone sensed but no one dared name aloud. The servants whispered among themselves in the kitchens, in the laundry courtyards, in the stables where the royal horses were groomed each morning. Something was wrong with the fisherman's daughter, they said. She had grown thin, pale, quiet. The prince, too, seemed distracted, snapping at advisors who had never once heard him raise his voice. It was Queen Adise who finally decided she could wait no longer. She sent for Naomi on the 4th morning, summoning her not to the throne room, which would have felt like judgment, but to her private study, a warm chamber lined with books and old maps, where the queen conducted the quieter business of the kingdom, the matters too delicate for public counsel. Naomi arrived trembling, certain that Daniel had broken his promise, certain that the truth had somehow already reached the queen's ears. She bowed deeply as she entered. "Sit, child," the queen said, gesturing to a cushioned chair across from her own. Her voice was gentler than Naomi had expected, though no less commanding. Naomi sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the intricate patterns woven into the rug beneath her feet. "I did not summon you to frighten you," the queen said, studying the girl before her, really studying her, perhaps for the first time since she had arrived at the palace months ago. She noted the paleness of her skin, the slight hollow beneath her eyes, the way her hands trembled even as she tried to still them. "I summoned you because I am worried." Naomi looked up, startled. "Worried, my queen? You have not been yourself these past days. My son has not been himself either. I am not a fool, Naomi. I have ruled this kingdom for 30 years. I know when a storm gathers beneath calm water." Naomi's throat tightened. She thought of Daniel's promise. "I chose you before my father, my mother, the chiefs, and the ministers, and wondered if now was the moment fate had chosen to unveil the truth she was not yet ready to speak. "My queen," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I." Before she could finish, a sharp knock interrupted them, and a young attendant entered, bowing quickly. "Forgive the intrusion, my queen. There's urgent news from the northern border. The chiefs request your presence immediately." Queen Adise's expression shifted instantly, the mother's concern folding away beneath the queen's duty. She rose swiftly. "We will continue this conversation another time, Naomi. But know this, whatever burden you carry, you need not carry it alone in silence. This palace has seen many storms. It has weathered all of them." She left the room with the attendant, her robes sweeping behind her, leaving Naomi alone in the quiet study, her heart pounding, the truth she had almost spoken now trapped once more behind her lips. The northern border crisis, as it turned out, was no small matter. A neighboring territory, ruled by the ambitious and often hostile Chief Marcus O'Yelleran, had begun making incursions into Aeon's grazing lands, testing the boundaries of an old treaty that had kept peace between the two territories for over a decade. King Obinna called an emergency council that evening, and Daniel, Adise and future king, was required to attend. It was well past midnight by the time the council concluded. Tensions still unresolved, a delegation planned to travel north within the week to negotiate before the dispute escalated into something bloodier. Daniel walked the darkened corridors alone, exhausted, his mind still tangled between matters of state and matters of the heart. He found himself, almost without deciding to, standing outside Naomi's chamber once more. He raised his hand and knocked softly. There was a long pause before the door opened. Naomi stood in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. "Daniel," she said quietly. "It is late." "I know," he said. "I could not sleep without seeing you first." She stepped aside, allowing him to enter, though her posture remained guarded, her arms crossed protectively over her stomach, a gesture Daniel noticed and felt his heart ache at witnessing. "I spoke with my mother today," Naomi said once the door was closed. "She summoned me. She knows something is wrong, Daniel. She is not a foolish woman." "What did you tell her?" "Nothing," Naomi said. "We were interrupted before I could say anything." "But Daniel, I cannot keep this hidden forever. Every day it grows harder to breathe under the weight of this secret." Daniel crossed the room and knelt before her, taking her hands gently in his own. "Then let us tell her together. Let us stop hiding, stop running from what is true. I would rather face my mother's judgment beside you than watch you suffer alone in silence." Naomi looked down at their joined hands, at the calluses on her own palms from years of pulling nets from the river, so different from the smooth, manicured hands of a prince. "And if she rejects us, if your father forbids this marriage, what then, Daniel? Where do we go? What do we become?" "Then we become whatever we must," Daniel said firmly. "I have told you before, and I will tell you again. I will take you to the UK if I must. I have resources there, connections through my education, friends who have offered sanctuary more than once during my studies abroad. We will not be without options, Naomi. We will not be without hope." Naomi's eyes filled with fresh tears, though these were different from the tears of the past few days. Not fear alone, but something softer beneath it, something that dared, despite everything, to hope. "Zara came to me," she said suddenly. 3 days ago, in the courtyard. She told me to leave, to go back to my village before the palace humiliates me." Daniel's jaw tightened, anger flashing briefly across his features. "Zara has no authority over you, Naomi. She never has." She spoke as though she already knew your future was decided, Daniel. As though your marriage to her was simply a matter of time, a formality yet to be announced. "My future was decided the day I met you beside that river, 3 years ago, watching you argue with a merchant over the price of smoked fish, refusing to back down even though he was twice your size and 3 times as loud," Daniel said, a small, tired smile breaking through his exhaustion. "I have never once considered Zara my future, no matter what expectations our families once held." Naomi almost laughed despite herself, the memory softening something tight in her chest. "I remember that merchant. He tried to cheat me out of half my earnings. And you called him a thief in front of the entire market, if I recall correctly. He was a thief." "I know," Daniel said softly, reaching up to brush a tear from her cheek. "That was the moment I knew I loved you, Naomi. Not because you were beautiful, though you are. Not because you were kind, though you are that too. But because you were brave. You have always been brave, even now, even carrying this fear inside you. You are still the bravest person I have ever known." Naomi leaned into his touch, some of the tension in her shoulders finally beginning to ease, though the fear had not vanished entirely. It had simply loosened its grip, if only for this quiet, stolen moment in the dark. "Give me time, Daniel," she whispered. "A little more time before we speak to your mother. I need to find my own courage first, not simply borrow yours." "Take whatever time you need," Daniel said. "But know that whenever you are ready, I will stand beside you. I will not let you face this alone." He stayed with her until the earliest hours of morning, when the sky began to lighten from black to deep indigo, the first birds beginning their songs beyond the palace walls. When he finally rose to leave, Careful not to be seen by the early-rising staff, Naomi caught his hand once more. "Daniel," she said, "thank you for not giving up on me." "I will never give up on you," he said, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Not now. Not ever." But even as those words hung tender in the quiet room, far beyond the palace walls, in the northern territories where dust rose from dry earth and old grudges festered beneath the surface of a fragile peace, a different kind of storm was gathering, one that would soon test not only the strength of Daniel's promises, but the very foundations upon which the kingdom of Ion had been built. For secrets, as Queen Adise had warned, never remained hidden forever. And in a palace built on centuries of pride, tradition, and unspoken rules, the truth Naomi carried within her would not wait much longer for the courage to be born. Morning came to Ion wrapped in a strange stillness, the kind that settles over a household when something unspoken hangs thick in every room. The palace kitchens buzzed as usual with the clatter of pots and the low murmur of servants preparing the royal breakfast. But even there, among the steam and the scent of roasting plantain, whispers passed from one ear to another like smoke curling beneath a closed door. "She has not eaten properly in days," one of the maids muttered to another as she arranged fruit upon a silver tray. "I took her food myself last night. She barely touched it." "The prince visits her chamber too often for a woman who is merely a guest," another replied, lowering her voice further. "Mark my words, there is more beneath this than any of us have been told." Queen Adise, passing the kitchen corridor on her way to the morning prayers held each day in the palace's small stone chapel, caught fragments of the conversation before the maids noticed her presence and fell silent. Bowing quickly, she said nothing, only nodded and continued on her way. But her mind turned the words over carefully, the way she turned over every piece of information that reached her, assessing, weighing, filing away for the moment it would prove useful. She had ruled long enough to know that palace whispers, however small, were rarely without foundation. Daniel found his father in the private stables that morning, examining a new stallion that had arrived as a gift from a visiting dignitary the week before. A magnificent creature, black as midnight, with a temper that had already thrown two of the palace's most experienced grooms. "He is beautiful," Daniel said, approaching slowly, keeping his voice low so as not to startle the animal. "Beautiful and dangerous," King Obina replied without turning. "Much like most things worth having." He ran a hand along the stallion's neck, and the animal, sensing something steady in the king's touch, calmed slightly beneath his palm. "You did not sleep last night, Daniel. I can see it in your eyes." The council meeting ran late, Daniel said, which was true, though not the whole truth. The king turned to face his son fully, his expression unreadable in the way that had made him such a formidable presence at negotiating tables across the continent. "You have always been a poor liar to me, my son, even when you believe yourself skilled at it. Tell me what troubles you." Daniel hesitated. He thought of Naomi's plea to wait, to find her own courage before facing the queen. But his father was a different matter, steady, measured, a man who had weathered scandal and crisis alike with the same unshaken calm. "Father," Daniel said carefully, "if a man loved a woman the kingdom did not expect him to love, what would you counsel him to do?" King Obina studied his son for a long moment, then returned his attention to the stallion, stroking its mane thoughtfully. "I would ask him first whether his love was built on truth or on illusion. Many young men mistake passion for love, Daniel, and passion fades quickly when tested by hardship. And if it were not illusion, if it had already been tested, then I would tell him that love alone has never been enough to secure a throne, but neither has duty alone ever built a happy kingdom. Somewhere between the two, a wise man finds his path." The king turned back to Daniel, his eyes narrowing slightly with the particular perceptiveness that had made him such an effective ruler. "This is about the fisherman's girl." Daniel did not deny it. "Her name is Naomi, father." "I know her name," the king said. "I have watched you these past months, Daniel. I am not blind, nor am I as rigid as you perhaps believe me to be. I once loved a woman my own father did not approve of." Daniel blinked, startled. "You did?" A faint, distant smile crossed the king's face, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. "Long before your mother, yes." It is not a story for today. But know this, I understand more than you think I do, Daniel. The question is not whether I can understand a prince's heart. The question is whether the kingdom can survive the consequences of following it. What do you mean? I mean that a crown is never worn by one person alone, my son. It is worn by an entire people. Every choice we make ripples outward, touching lives we will never meet, decisions in villages we will never visit, alliances that either hold strong or crumble depending on the perception of our strength and unity. If you choose this path, you must be prepared for every consequence that follows, not only for yourself, but for her as well. Daniel absorbed his father's words in silence, the weight of them settling heavy in his chest. He thought of Naomi, alone in her chamber, carrying a secret that would soon become impossible to hide, and felt a fresh urgency rise within him. "I'm prepared, Father," he said finally. "Whatever consequences come, I'm prepared to face them, so long as I do not have to face them without her." King Obinna studied his son a moment longer, then nodded slowly, as if satisfied by something he had been searching for. "Then perhaps," he said quietly, "it is time you told your mother the truth, before the truth finds its own way of announcing itself." Daniel's chest tightened. "You already suspect." "I suspect many things, Daniel. I have not survived 30 years upon this throne by being blind to the currents moving beneath the surface of my own household." The king turned back to the stallion, ending the conversation as decisively as he had begun it. "Go to your mother. Speak plainly. Whatever comes after, at least it will come honestly." That afternoon, dark clouds finally broke over Ion, releasing the rain that had threatened for days. It fell in heavy sheets across the palace gardens, drumming against the stone courtyards, sending servants scrambling to close shutters and gather laundry left out to dry. Naomi stood at the window of her chamber, watching the storm with a strange sense of kinship, as though the sky itself understood the turmoil churning within her. A soft knock sounded at her door. She turned, expecting Daniel, but found instead one of the younger palace maids, a girl named Ephema who had shown Naomi small kindnesses since her arrival, extra portions at mealtimes, quiet company during the loneliest hours of her stay. "Miss Naomi," Ephema said, slipping inside and closing the door behind her, her expression troubled. "I must speak with you, but you must promise not to reveal that I have come." "What is it?" Naomi asked, alarm rising in her chest. "Zara has been asking questions," Ephema said, her voice low and urgent. "She spoke with 2 of the kitchen maids this morning, asking about your appetite, whether you have been unwell, whether the prince visits your chamber late at night. I fear she suspects something, Miss Naomi, and Zara is not a woman who lets suspicion rest quietly." Naomi's blood ran cold. "Does she know?" "I do not believe she knows for certain," Ephema said, "but she is close to guessing. And if she guesses correctly, I fear she will not keep the knowledge to herself. Zara has long believed her marriage to Prince Daniel a foregone conclusion. She will not accept losing that future without a fight." Naomi sank onto the edge of her bed, her hands trembling as they had trembled so often these past days. "Thank you, Ephema, for warning me. I only wish I could do more," the young maid said softly. "You have been kind to me since your arrival, Miss Naomi, kinder than many who hold far higher stations than you. I do not believe you deserve the cruelty Zara intends, if her suspicions prove correct." After Ephema left, Naomi remained sitting on the edge of her bed for a long while, staring at nothing, her mind racing through possibilities, each one darker than the last. If Zara discovered the truth before Daniel and Naomi found the courage to reveal it themselves, there would be no controlling the narrative that followed. Zara would ensure the story painted Naomi as a schemer, a fisherman's daughter who had seduced a prince to secure her own fortune, rather than 2 people who had genuinely, helplessly fallen in love. She rose from the bed and began to pace, her hand instinctively pressing against her still flat stomach. "I will not let them make you a scandal before you have even taken your first breath," she whispered fiercely to the child growing within her. "I will not let them shame you before they have even met you." It was in that moment, standing alone in the stormlit chamber, rain hammering against the windows, that Naomi finally found the courage Daniel had been waiting for her to discover. She would not wait any longer. She would not let fear dictate the terms of her own life, nor allow Zara's cruelty to write the story before Naomi had the chance to tell it herself, honestly, on her own terms. She left her chamber and made her way through the rain-darkened corridors toward the queen's private study, her heart pounding with each step, but her spine straight, her resolve hardening with every stride. Queen Adise was alone when Naomi arrived, seated by the window, watching the storm with the same contemplative stillness she brought to every quiet moment of her day. She looked up as Naomi entered, unannounced, her wrapper damp from the brief dash across the open courtyard. "Naomi," the queen said, surprise flickering across her composed features. "I did not expect." "Forgive my intrusion, my queen," Naomi said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I must speak with you. Now, before my courage fails me again." Something in the girl's expression, the mixture of fear and determination, the trembling hands held so carefully still at her sides, told the queen this was no small matter. She gestured to the chair across from her own. "Sit," she said. "Speak freely. Whatever burden you carry, I am listening." Naomi sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, and for a long moment, she simply breathed, gathering the last fragments of her courage before finally speaking the words that would change everything. "My queen," she began, "3 days ago, I visited the palace physician. I have been feeling unwell, tired, nauseous, unable to keep food down some mornings." She paused, forcing herself to meet the queen's steady gaze. "The physician confirmed what I had begun to suspect myself. I am pregnant, my queen. 1 month along. The child is Daniel's." The words hung in the air between them, heavy as the storm still raging beyond the windows. Queen Adise's expression did not change immediately. Decades of ruling had taught her to receive even the most shocking news without betraying her thoughts too quickly. But her eyes, sharp and assessing, studied Naomi with new intensity. "You are certain," the queen said finally. It was not truly a question. The physician was certain, my queen. "I have not misled you, nor would I ever attempt to deceive you about something of this magnitude." The queen rose from her chair and moved to the window, her back to Naomi, watching the rain fall in silver sheets across the gardens below. Naomi waited, her heart hammering, uncertain whether the silence stretching between them signaled fury or contemplation or something else entirely. "Does my son know?" the queen asked without turning. "Yes, my queen. Daniel was with me when the physician delivered the news, and he has kept this from me for 3 days. I asked him to wait," Naomi said quickly, unwilling to let Daniel bear the weight of a decision that had been his alone to make. "I needed time to find my own courage before facing you, my queen. Daniel wished to tell you immediately. I'm the one who asked for silence." The queen turned back to face her, and Naomi braced herself for anger, for the cold fury she had imagined during countless sleepless nights this past week. Instead, she found something far more complicated in the queen's expression, sorrow, perhaps, mixed with something that might almost have been reluctant respect. "You have more courage than I gave you credit for, Naomi," the queen said quietly. "Many women in your position would have fled the palace the moment they learned this news, terrified of the consequences. You instead chose to come to me directly, knowing full well the storm that confession might unleash. I did not wish for you to learn the truth from anyone but myself, my queen. You deserve that much respect, regardless of what you decide to do with this knowledge." Queen Adise returned to her seat, studying the young woman before her with new eyes. "Do you love my son, Naomi? Truly? Not the prince, not the crown he will one day wear, not the wealth and comfort that comes attached to his name, but Daniel himself, the man beneath all of that." "I loved him before I knew he was a prince, my queen," Naomi said softly. "I loved him when I believed him merely a curious young man who lingered too long at the fish market, asking too many questions about nets and tides for someone with no apparent interest in fishing. I have never once cared for his crown. I have only ever cared for him." Something shifted in the queen's expression at this, a softening, however slight, however carefully guarded. She thought of her own youth, of a love she had once set aside for duty, and wondered, not for the first time, whether the world might have looked different had she possessed even half the courage this young woman had just displayed. "This will not be simple, Naomi," the queen said finally. "There will be those in this palace, in this kingdom, who will not accept this easily. Zara's family holds significant influence. The council will have opinions. The people themselves may resist a queen who did not arrive through the traditional path of alliance and arrangement. I understand, my queen." "You understand the concept," the queen said, not unkindly, "but you have not yet lived the reality. It is one thing to accept difficulty in theory. It is another to endure it in practice. The whispers, the judgment, the doubt that will follow you every day for the rest of your life within these walls. Then I will endure it, my queen, as I have endured difficulty before. I did not arrive in this world with wealth or status. I have known hunger, known labor, known the particular exhaustion of building something from nothing. I am not afraid of hardship. I'm only afraid of losing what I love because I was too fearful to fight for it." The queen studied Naomi for a long moment, something akin to admiration flickering behind her composed features. Finally, she rose once more, moving to stand before the young woman, and extended her hand, a gesture that, from a queen, carried the weight of acceptance far beyond its simple physical meaning. "Rise, Naomi," she said. Naomi rose, trembling, uncertain what this gesture meant. "I will not pretend this news does not complicate matters significantly," Queen Adise said. "But I will also not pretend that I did not see this coming, in some form. From the moment my son first spoke your name 3 years ago with a light in his eyes I had not witnessed since his childhood. Whatever storms lie ahead, know that you do not face them entirely alone. You carry my grandchild, Naomi. That alone earns you a measure of my protection, regardless of what else follows." Tears filled Naomi's eyes, relief and gratitude mixing with the lingering fear that had governed her these past days. "Thank you, my queen. Thank you for your understanding." "Do not thank me yet," the queen said, though her tone had softened considerably. "There remains much work ahead of us before this palace. This kingdom accepts what you carry as a blessing rather than a scandal. Zara's family will not receive this news gracefully. The council will raise objections. We must move carefully, strategically, if we hope to secure both your position and the legitimacy of the child you carry. I will do whatever is necessary, my queen." "Good," Queen Adise said, a faint, determined smile crossing her features, the expression of a woman who had spent 30 years navigating palace politics and intended to bring every ounce of that experience to bear on this new challenge. "Then let us begin. First, we must speak with the king. He suspects already, I believe, though he has said nothing directly to me. After that, we must consider how and when to make this news known more broadly, before rumor and speculation write a version of this story far less favorable than the truth deserves." As the two women began to talk, strategizing quietly as the storm raged on beyond the windows, neither of them noticed the shadow that had lingered just beyond the study door during the final moments of their conversation, nor the soft, careful footsteps that retreated swiftly down the corridor, carrying with them a secret that would not remain contained for long. Zara had heard enough.